So today we're going to explore the whole area of thoughts. It comes up this week for a couple of reasons. I think one, in my practice relating to thoughts and shifting my relationship to thoughts, was a key part of the evolution of my practice. And the other reason is I've been communicating with somebody who watched a video on YouTube, and we had quite a dialogue virtually about what was happening in their practice, and it had a lot to do with thoughts. So they had a teacher that told them that if they quiet their mind, their true nature will shine through. Which if the mind is quiet, your true nature can shine through. But the person thought that they had to really try to quiet their mind, that this was the first step, right, in the process. So the question was, how do I quiet my mind? Every time I sit down to meditate with the intention to quiet my mind, I just have thoughts. And the harder I try, the more thoughts I seem to have. So I see a lot of heads nodding in the room. So I don't think a surprise to many people that the first thing I said was, you can't stop thoughts. A reality of this practice is we cannot stop the mind from producing thoughts. And the more that we try, the worse it gets. The old saying, Carl Jung said this originally, what you resist persists and even grows. And so it's become also kind of a mantra in mindfulness circles, that what you resist persists. And it does, in fact, grow. It exacerbates the whole process. The more we try to battle with our thoughts, the worse they'll get. And in psychology, it's called ironic process theory. And there's been research on this where they've shown that when people try to suppress an intrusive thought, they're more likely to have that intrusive thought, right? So it's something that, it's not something that's only known in kind of meditation or contemplative circles. It's something that is known in psychology as well. So that's really the first step in this, is to not try to stop thoughts. And even if you've heard that, so I said that to this person, and then I got back, well, how do I quiet the mind if I don't try to stop thoughts? So there's this real deep sense that if the mind is chattering, there's something wrong with my meditation. I'm not doing it right. I've got to try something else. Maybe I got to sit in a different posture, or be in a quieter surrounding, or maybe I'll listen to music, or something. I try all these different things, and this person had tried all these things, listening to music. It was really a study in what not to say to somebody to move them along on their meditation journey. But we had quite a dialogue, and the person said, okay, I'm going to just accept thoughts arising. I'll sit, and if there's a busy mind, I won't try to resist it. So then did that for a couple days and came back and said, okay, I just sat and I just sat there and I was just thinking. I planned my garden. I figured out what I had to buy when I went to the store. And I just accepted it all. But I ended up just sitting and thinking. I said, well, meditation isn't sitting and thinking either. Well, but if I'm not stopping my thoughts and I'm not thinking, what am I doing? Like, I can't just say there's nothing you can do. The person's just beginning their path. So I give them something to do, right? Give the egoic mind something to do. And so I said, be the witness to the thoughts. So just step back, you could even picture it as in Zen, they say it's a step back, and just kind of hover as the observer of the thoughts arising, and just noticing, oh, there's a thought passing by. I often use the metaphor of clouds passing by through the sky. The clouds, it may be storm clouds, it may be puffy clouds. All different clouds just pass through the sky, and of course the sky just is unaffected by whatever clouds pass through it. The sky is still the sky and remains unaffected. So taking that stance of the witness and just stepping back from the whole process, from the thinking process. Oh, the other thing I did on the stopping thoughts, and you've probably heard this, some of you, is think of something that comes to mind, a pleasant conversation you've had or some plans that you have. And while you're doing this, you can do it right now, just thinking about, kind of whatever comes to mind. While you're doing it, don't think about a pink elephant. Can't think about a pink elephant. Now, I did it for about 10 or 15 seconds there. You really can't usually go more than about 5 seconds without thinking of a pink elephant. In ironic process theory, they use, for some reason, a white bear. But we tend to use a pink elephant in mindfulness circles for some reason. So that's just that kind of reinforced the idea that you can't stop thoughts. And the other is you can't control thoughts. You can't control what thoughts will arise. That's the other thing, is we think, well, this is my mind, right? And I like to, I try to control things in my environment so that things don't go off the rails in my life. We think we have that kind of control. We think we even have control over the mind. So the other is, think of the color blue. Now think of the color purple. And think of the color yellow. So you probably didn't find that too difficult. Now only think happy thoughts for the rest of the evening. So if you had control over your mind, you would get up in the morning and say, I'm going to have happy thoughts for the rest of the day. And you would only have happy thoughts. Well, of course, it's something if you can try it and see what happens. You'll quickly find that your mind will produce whatever thoughts come up based on unknown causes and conditions, upbringing, environment, genetics, culture, upteen number of factors that will just come in to produce. Then this thought arises. And it's the same when we sit and meditate. These thoughts just arise, and sometimes they're quite bizarre. So we can witness thoughts just coming to mind. Maybe the first time I heard that was Ram Dass saying that, and he would just talk about, watching thoughts go by like a river flowing by. I don't know if you've heard him use that in his talks. I mean, he's passed away now, but in his talks in the past, the river flowing by, and just watching the thoughts just flow by without taking them personally, believing that they're true in any way, and just taking that place as the witness. And so here we're disidentifying with our thoughts. It's really a practice of disidentifying, because we tend to be so identified with our thoughts as really important and personal and true that we really get pushed around by the mind. And it's incessant. It just goes and goes and goes, this chatter. In fact, in that movie, they called it the noise. Some people could control the noise. So they actually call the thoughts the noise, which I thought was kind of an interesting. It's kind of like, sometimes it feels like noise, like there's just this chatter, 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 chatter. It's like having a roommate that, won't shut up. It's just like, just chatter, chatter. Of course, all our minds are a little different. Not everybody's mind may be like that. This mind likes to and in particular, before was very chatty. So it's being the witness, so stepping back. So here we're identifying with the witness rather than the thoughts. So it's still, there's still an identification of the witnessing self, as I've called it in the past. We're stepping back from identifying with the egoic self, which produces all the thoughts. The ego is the egoic mind, and we're stepping back and being the witness. And the more you can do that, whether you're meditating or whether you're just going through your day, it can feel very freeing. And when the mind's particularly chatty, lots of narrative, it's, oh, look, I can just witness that. I can step back from it and just watch the show and be the witness. And when you step back in that way, perhaps there's some stillness. Because one thing I found was that when I wasn't taking it also personally and identifying with it, it tended to dissolve somewhat, right? It tended to soften. Not quite as insistent as well, the thoughts. So there might be some thoughts that came up, but they weren't as, insistent, demanding, not so compulsive, not creating a compulsive action. Oh, I got to do this, then I got to do this. Could be some space. So as you're listening to a talk like this, your mind might be thinking, how do I do that? I tried that, really didn't work. So then I wonder if I do it this way, if it'll work. Can you just step back and be the witness to all that? So even the self-talk about how to not get identified with the self-talk, so it's thinking about not thinking, stepping back and witnessing that. Because I know when I used to listen to these talks, I'd sit there and go, I'd be thinking really hard about how can I not think? How can I get Ram Dass? How can I just tell me how I can be like a river instead of like a merry-go-round? And so step back from that. Step back from the thoughts about not thinking. Step back and witness the whole show. And of course, we can do this with anything. Right? Emotions, body sensations, whatever it might be, sounds. The reason, and of course the Buddha had the 5 aggregates, the 5 areas where we experience life as a human being, and the 5 areas that we then identify with as being who we are, which is the form or the body, feeling tone, the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, perceptions, how we perceive the things that are happening, and mental formations. The 4th, which is one of them is thoughts. And I really think thoughts in our culture is really a core one. I think we spend so much of our day using the thinking mind that we get kind of almost addicted to thinking. It's like an addiction. And the 5th aggregate is sense consciousness, which I've talked about all 5 of those in the past. But I wanted to really, after speaking to this person about thoughts, really sort of focus in on that one part of the 5 aggregates, and how we can witness thoughts. Just stepping back. So I'm witnessing thoughts right now, and of course there's no thought about what to say next coming up, because I'm not, for me to think of something to say next, I have to be involved in the thoughts a little bit, right? So if I just step back and witness the mind, that would be a talk. I just sit here. Process is stepping back and witnessing in that way, and allowing the space to fill in, stepping back from the addiction to thinking. And I really do think we have an addiction to thinking in our culture, and we don't want to give up the addiction. We kind of, it's entertaining in a way. It's it's like something to do, and there's nothing to do. Just sit and think. If we get on our phones, we can distract ourselves a bit from the mind, right? In a way, the smartphone is a way, as another distract. We watch TV. They're all ways to distract ourselves from all this thinking. I did whitewater kayaking. Now there's a really good way to distract yourself, because you can't think when you're barreling down a rapid in a little piece of plastic with another piece of plastic and you gotta, you're focused. Of course, then you run the rapid, then you come out and the mind starts up again, but you can't wait for the next one where the thinking will stop. So I think even a lot of these kind of extreme sports or things that we do that are adrenaline events or sports, it's a way to get us out of our head. In many cases, I think that's what we're doing. We kind of crave to get out of this addiction to thinking. Of course, that's a temporary fix, right? It works, gives us a break, but then we're right back into it. So this is a way that we can do it any time, whether we're meditating or not, and just become the observer of the mind. So those are kind of the two first steps, and realizing that we can't stop thoughts, and becoming the witness of the thinking process. And I really invite you to play around with that. The fellow that I invited to do that really came back and said it changed his whole way of meditating. From trying to stop thoughts to just allowing and witnessing. Now the allowing part is really important, right? Not stopping means allowing. So we're accepting that there's a busy mind, we're allowing, and we're just witnessing. And the other thing that I'd like to bring to it is the context of self-compassion and self-love. Because this is going to be challenging if you're new to this kind of process. There's going to be self-judging thoughts that arise. If you get caught in the content and are no longer the witness, but become caught in the content of the thinking, there may be self-judgment, self-criticism. So bringing that self-compassion, realizing that there's no perfect way to do this, that it's a process of beginning again, and that it's quite natural to slip back into the story of me and the story of the egoic mind. So bring that self-love to the process. And then the third kind of step is, so we're identifying with the witness self, we could even call it. The third step, I would say, is seeing if we can sense into the knowing that is before thought. Right? We think that knowing comes from our thinking. And I'm not saying that not to think. not to use this amazing tool that we have to solve problems and create things. I mean, this building wouldn't be here if it wasn't a thought. The building is a thought. That all this technology that so we can zoom and so on is a thought. It had to be a thought that then somebody took and created a camera and a silicone chip and a laptop and so on and so forth, microphones and everything else. So we use our minds in those ways to create, to innovate, and so forth. So then we get sucked into thinking, well, that's where all the knowing occurs. That's if I want to know the truth of reality, that's where I'll find it. There's this idea spills over into the spiritual realm, and it just doesn't work out that way. We can tune into reality, a true nature, real nature, by sensing into that which is before thinking. So some people call it tuning into awareness or resting in awareness, which isn't quite accurate, but it's a way to step back from the witness to something that's before thinking. There's a knowing, a seeing that's before thinking arises, that's always there. So you don't have to go create it or find it. It's seeing and sensing into this knowing that's already there. So that's what I would say would be the third step. And of course, I'm going to step back when we witness thoughts and disidentify with thoughts. We start to see which thoughts are creating the are creating the patterns of a separate self, the illusory separate self that you hear so much about, right? The anatta, as the Buddha called it, the self that's not self. We start to see the thoughts that create that illusory sense of self. So there's a whole realm, there's a whole bunch of thoughts that we can say, oh wow, that thought patterns, that's really separating. So it's me and that, or me and them. There's really a sense of a separate self being created there. And we can start to see, okay, from this witness point, I can kind of really see the egoic mind trying to remain center stage, right? The me. The story of me, starring me, all about me. You start to see how self-oriented we are as human beings. And you can allow, by standing back and witnessing them, they can start to dissolve and loosen their grip on us. And what becomes then clear, because I'm going back to again this conversation, is there are thoughts that are quite practical, useful, and creative that we do kind of pursue and engage with. So you really start to see and you discern how this mind can be useful as a practical tool, and not at the same time recreate and fabricate the illusory separate self. Do people do you see what I'm saying here? I think because we struggle with, when we hear, you're not your thoughts are not true, but I need my thoughts. I work at a job where I have to think all day, and now you're saying I can't. So I'm not saying, we reject all our thoughts and just say, I'm not, that's trying to stop, right? It's saying really discern what thoughts are creative, useful, practical, so we still plan with the future, we still do all these things. And those thoughts we can really see as having that practical nature. And then the thoughts that are simply solidifying this illusory sense of a separate self can be seen for what they are, as creating this sense of separation. And to do that, I think to have that discerning capacity, it's helpful to do it from the place of witnessing thoughts, because now they're not personal. When we're entangled, the Buddha used the word entangled a lot. It's like a knot. We're all entangled in our thoughts. When we can just witness it, we can untangle the tangle and let the self-creating thoughts dissolve and fall away. They loosen. The knot loosens, and then they can just kind of fall away on their own. And they do fall away on their own as we step back from them and disidentify with them. And what we also notice is very naturally the mind continues to produce very creative, innovative, practical thoughts. And what's so surprising is when your mind's not so busy creating the separate self, think of all the capacity. It's like having a 6-cylinder car, and 5 of the cylinders are doing something other than propelling the car. They're recreating a false image of the vehicle or something, right? The energy's going into some, and you're only really using 1 cylinder to propel the car. That's kind of how we use how these minds are working.